السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All praises due to Allah. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon His final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Since, alhamdulillah, we returned after a long delay, we'll start with a couple of revision questions to make sure that we're all on the same boat. We all are aware of the past matters so that we can continue forward with the new matters, inshallah. So last week, 2 weeks ago, we discussed invalidators of wudu. And before that, we mentioned matters regarding wiping over footwear. Who can remind me of what are the conditions or the methodology of wiping over footwear? Go ahead, yes.
So, first, you have to be in a state of purity.
So, number one, a complete water purification has to be done. So, wudu, ablution, yes, then.
And then you wear the socks, and then
what about the socks? What about them? What is the condition?
cover the entire foot.
Okay, it has to cover the entire area of wudu. It has to cover the entire area of wudu. So wearing socks that are below the ankles, you're not allowed to wipe on them. So it has to cover the whole area of wudu. Okay, what else?
And when you do wudu, you just have to wipe the top.
So next type. So you had the full, you did the full water purification. So you did wudu, complete wudu with water. Then you wore your socks on a complete purity. طيب. Then you went to the toilet, you broke your wudu, and now when you renewed your wudu, after washing all of your limbs, once you reach the foot, what do? You wipe. You wipe over them. طيب. Now, there are a couple of matters regarding this. Maybe you can remind us. What is the duration of the wipe? Yes. 1 day for a resident, so it's 24 hours. Okay. 3 days for a traveler, so 72 hours for a traveler. So during this 1 day, so a person, after he uses, for example, the toilet, he relieves himself, he performs wudu, he wipes. As soon as he wipes, he has 24 hours, he keeps the socks on. Whenever he uses the toilet, he can just go and wipe. He does the wudu and he wipes. He doesn't need to remove the socks and wash his feet. All he needs to do is do a wudu, and he can wipe over the footwear. طيب, for 24 hours. Yes.
What are the conditions to be counted as a traveler so that you can wear socks for 3 days?
طيب, I'll mention rules regarding a traveler or who is considered a traveler after we mention these points now. So we have 24 hours. Now, after the expiry of these 24 hours, so let's give an example. At Dhuhr time, he made a full wudu. No, before that, in the morning, before going to work, 8 a.m., he did a full wudu, and then he wore his socks, and then he wore his shoes. His shoes are not covering his ankles, but the socks are. طيب, good. He goes to work, he goes to the toilet before Dhuhr adhan, he comes out, he does a wudu, he washes all of his body parts, except the feet, which he wore his socks on. And so now he wipes over the socks. So from, let's say it's 11:30 p.m. From 11:30 p.m. now he has 24 hours. So all the way until, 11:30 a.m. All the way until 11:30 a.m. next day, he can still wipe over the socks. So at Maghrib time, he goes to the toilet again. He can just renew his wudu and wipe over his socks. He can keep wearing his socks. So what if he sleeps? It doesn't matter. Sleeping does not affect wearing the socks. طيب, what if he wiped over his feet, he wiped over the footwear, and next day, so it's next day now, 11:10 he wiped over the footwear. He made the wudu and he wiped over the footwear. Now it reached 11:30 a.m. So now 24 hours are complete. So this is the matter, this is an area of dispute. If the duration ends, is the wudu still intact since he wiped over it, or does he need to redo the wudu? What did we say regarding this? Huh? It's whispering. Give me a proper answer. Yeah. You redo your wudu. So we said, based on the majority of scholars, they said with the expiry of the 24 hours, the wudu is invalidated. So if you did wipe, if the wudu is based on a wipe, and 24 hours have passed, this wudu is considered invalidated. You have to remove your socks and do a complete wudu again. This is one thing. The other thing is, what if before 24 hours you decide to remove your socks, even though you wiped over them? So now you're able to pray. You wiped over your socks, you did the wudu, you wiped over your socks, you prayed Asr, for example, and then you went home and you removed your socks. Can you go and hold the Quran and recite from the Quran? If yes, why? If no, why? So you prayed Asr with Jama'ah, alhamdulillah, and then you went home, you removed your socks that you wiped on. And then you decided to sit home and hold the Mus'haf and recite from the Mus'haf. Is this allowed or not? Why? You have, but if you give an answer, you have to justify.
No, because holding a mushaf means wudu.
Good.
Wudu is broken.
We said, okay, whose opinion is this, that holding a mushaf requires wudu? Do you remember? All four imams. The Jumhur, everyone says this. That it is required for you to hold a mushaf, not the mobile phone, a mushaf. It is required to hold it in a state of purity. But yes, you might hear some scholars here, there. We respect all scholars. But the opinion of the majority, the four imams, is that no, a wudu is required. So he said he can't hold the mushaf and recite from the mushaf because he's not in the state of purity. Why is that? When did he break the purity? When he removed his socks. This is another matter of dispute. And the majority in this matter also, they said if he removed his socks, the wudu is invalidated. Our scholars, yes, some of our scholars said this has no effect. If a person removes his socks, his wudu is still intact. But look, these matters where there is no clear evidence, and a person should protect his worship. We always advise this. Always protect your worship and take the opinion of the majority in such matters, especially when there's no clear evidence. Both sides, their evidence or their proofs is based on there's no clear text from the Quran and Sunnah to support either opinion. But what the majority understood, this is something that they all understood, they all agreed upon, even though they have different ways of extracting rulings, yet they all agreed on this ruling. A person, and in these matters, it's good to take the safer route and to protect your worship and take the safer opinion. So removing socks, yes, it invalidates your wudu. You have to do it again. Even recent scholars, Sheikh bin Baz and bin Uthaymeen, they differed regarding this. Sheikh bin Baz went with the majority. He said, no, if you wiped your socks, if you wiped your feet, and then you removed your socks, your wudu is invalidated. And it was interesting, the Sheikh bin Baz said, my son, Sheikh bin Uthaymeen, he referred to him as my son. He mentioned the other opinion, that he said the wudu is not invalidated. And he said, no, but what he said is wrong. And they're all our scholars. Yet this matter, there's so much dispute, and a person should protect his worship regarding this. So if you wipe over your footwear, if you wipe over your socks, when you remove them, your wudu will be invalidated. This matter should be clear. Okay. Of the invalidators of wudu, we mentioned sleeping. is all type of sleeping, does it all invalidate your wudu? Yani sleeping in itself, it invalidates your wudu, or is something related to sleeping? So what exactly invalidates your wudu? Yes. It's deep sleep. So here scholars, when you look at this matter, it's good to, yani what the scholars say, differentiating between deep sleep and just drowsiness. And they use the hadith that the companions used to sit and wait for Isha prayer, and some of them might doze off. طيب. But then when the prayer time starts, they would all stand up and pray. They did not renew their wudu. So they said, this state here, they said the Sahaba were not in deep sleep. They were drowsy. And a person might close his eyes, lower his head, but he's not in deep sleep. So as soon as he hears something around him, or he feels a movement, he directly wakes up. This is not deep sleep. A person in this state is not considered sleeping, and we say that your wudu is invalidated because of sleep. He's still conscious to a certain extent. He's still conscious. But deep sleep, a person lying down, he's unaware of his surrounding. No, this person definitely invalidated his wudu. He did invalidate his wudu. Another matter that we mentioned here is eating camel meat. We said eating camel meat invalidates your wudu. Even though eating camel meat, the majority of scholars say it does not invalidate your wudu. And the Hanbali madhab said, no, it does invalidate your wudu. But you said, Sheikh, how come you just said a few matters ago, you said that following the majority is good? Yes, but here there's a clear text. It's not just, opinions. No, there's a clear text. When a person asked the Messenger of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, do we repeat our wudu after eating sheep? After eating sheep, he said, from the sheep meat. He said, no. He said, if you want, you can perform wudu, and if you don't want, you don't need to. And then a person asked him, after eating camel meat, do I need to do wudu? He said, yes. After eating camel meat, you do need to do wudu. So this is where the dispute lies in. But if a person was following, the other opinion, and he asked a scholar, or he's following a madhab, or he himself is following the other opinion, and he ate camel meat and went and prayed, based on what he chose for himself, he believes that this is the stronger opinion, his prayer is valid. If you have taken this other opinion, if you followed this hadith, you're acting upon it, you feel that eating camel meat will invalidate your wudu, yes, for you, if you do eat camel meat, if you perform wudu, eat camel meat, and go to pray, your prayer will be invalid. Why? Because your wudu is invalid because of eating camel meat. So this is, it's good to understand, why scholars differed regarding these matters. Now we're going to be talking about a very important matter that requires concentration, and many people make mistakes regarding this, which is matters of ghusl. The hadith عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا اغتسل من الجنابة غسل يديه. So the Messenger Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, when he would do ghusl for janaba, removing the major ritual impurity, he would start by washing his hands. That's the sunnah, starting by washing your hands first. Then وتوضأ وضوءه للصلاة. Okay, وتوضأ وضوءه للصلاة. After that, he would perform ablution, doing wudu. But the other narration, some other wives of the Messenger of Muhammad ﷺ mentioned that he started by washing his hands and washing his private parts. He started with this. After this, after washing the private parts, washing his hands, washing his private parts, then he would start with wudu. So the sunnah when doing ghusl is to start, after washing your private parts, to start with wudu. A full wudu, a normal wudu that you would do for prayer. The exact same wudu that you would do that you would do for prayer. طيب غسل يديه وتوضأ وضوءه للصلاة. And then she said ثم اغتسل ثم يخلل بيده شعره ثم يخلل بيده شعره. After that, after performing the wudu, he would start and rub his hair, whether in his head and his beard. حتى إذا ظن أنه قد أروى بشرته. So after, rubbing his head enough, thinking that خلاص water has gone through his head completely, أفاض عليه الماء 3 مرات ثم غسل سائر جسده. After that, after washing his head, making sure that the water has gone through his head and he rubbed his head, he'd pour water over his head 3 times and then washing the rest of the body. So from this hadith alone, we know that the sunnah is to start by washing your hands, washing your private parts, washing your hands, and then performing normal wudu. After performing wudu, you start with washing the head first, and then washing the rest of your body. Of course, from other hadith, we also know that he would start with his right side first before the left. Now, this methodology is the sunnah. It does not mean if a person does not follow this methodology that his ghusl is invalid. Be careful. The obligation is less than this. What is required is less than this. But if you want to do the complete ghusl, as in you want to get the reward of following the sunnah of the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ, this is what you do. You start with washing the private parts first, then washing your hands, then performing a complete wudu, then your head, then the rest of your body, starting with the right side. So when you wash, for example, you start with your right shoulder, your right hand, then your left shoulder, your left hand, and so on. طيب. When is ghusl an obligation? Ghusl is an obligation when with number 1, seminal emission. Seminal emission. طيب, any seminal emission? They said the normal, usual seminal emission, which means semen exiting its natural outlet accompanied by pleasure. Why do they mention all these things? Because sometimes a person is hit or he's suffering from a certain illness. There might be seminal emission, but that's not out of pleasure. This is out of disease. This has no effect. This is not ghusl. Ghusl is not required because this is unusual. So when scholars say خروج المني خروجا معتادا من مخرجه المعتاد. So they say, for example, seminal fluid, seminal emission coming out from its usual outlet accompanied with pleasure, because this is how it usually occurs. طيب. So this is very important for you to be aware of this. طيب. One might say, Sheikh, I wake up from sleep, I might find that there is seminal emission without me experiencing, for example, any pleasure. What is the ruling? The ruling here, if a person was asleep and then he woke up and he found seminal emission, then the ruling is tied to this. Then ghusl is required. Ghusl is required if he finds seminal emission. If a person slept and he saw something in his sleep, but he woke up, he saw no seminal emission, khalas, there's no ghusl. Ghusl is tied with wetness. If you find wetness and you're sure that this is seminal emission, khalas, you have to do ghusl. The other matter here is sexual penetration. Even if there's no seminal emission, with sexual penetration in itself, this is considered, something that will require you to do ghusl. As soon as there's sexual penetration, that means ghusl is required. Of course, for the woman, menstruation, the end of the menstruation. So after the end of the period, ghusl is required. The same thing we say about postpartum bleeding. After the postpartum bleeding ends, ghusl is required. Also, ghusl is also required for death. When a person passes away, before burying him, of his rights is to perform ghusl. And when you perform ghusl there in janazah, matters of janazah, it is the exact same thing. You try to apply the sunnah when performing ghusl on him. This is when it is an obligation. When is it preferred to do ghusl? Can someone tell me when is it preferred to do ghusl? Example. Yes. Ghusl for Jum'ah prayer. There's a sunnah performing ghusl for Jum'ah prayer. That's one sunnah. Yes. Eid prayer, that's another sunnah. بس عيد الجمعة. ها؟ غسل العيد ذكرنا غسل العيد وغسل الجمعة. What else? Yes.
It can be any prayer?
No, yeah, but where is it preferred to do this for any prayer? This is the thing. Is it sunnah for every prayer? So doing wudu for every prayer, yes, this is preferred. But we're talking about here ghusl for a preferred ghusl. We mentioned Eid prayer, we mentioned Jum'ah prayer, we mentioned what else? Ihram. Ghusl for ihram. Ghusl. Someone asked me this question. He said, is it an obligation to perform ghusl if you wash the dead? It's preferred. This is one of the preferred ghusl. And there's an interesting matter, accepting Islam. In Muslim centers, they do this. The person accepts Islam, so you have to do ghusl. Did you hear about this? Person accepts Islam, that he has to do ghusl. Ibrahim? We hear about this. Where is this? This is based on actually the Hanbali madhab. The Hanbali madhab obligates this, that a person accepting Islam, he should do ghusl. Now we're talking about, if a person, of course, he did, and he was in a state of janaba, then he accepts Islam, all four madhabs will say he has to do ghusl. But we don't know, and he's not in the state of janaba. طيب, and he accepted Islam. There is some evidence, in certain instances, the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ did command a person who accepted Islam to perform ghusl. He said, after he accepted Islam, he said, go and perform ghusl. But we also know that many people came to Islam, and we did not find in the text that the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ told them to go and perform ghusl. This is why it's a dispute. The majority of scholars, the Jumhur, say no, it's not an obligation to perform ghusl when accepting Islam. The Hanbali madhab said, actually, the Hanbali madhab said it's an obligation. The majority said it's mustahab. The majority said it is mustahab. It's preferred to do ghusl. طيب. Now here, this is one of the most important points regarding ghusl. What is the least amount, what is considered sufficient for ghusl? What is the least amount that is considered sufficient? Yes?
Doing the niyyah and then making the water all over your body.
Good. Making the good thing that you mentioned the niyyah. Important point. Mentioning the niyyah is very important. Mentioning the niyyah first, having the niyyah of ghusl, and number two, encompassing your whole body with water. So making sure you're under the shower, making sure that water flows over all of your body, even if you did not touch your body, even if you did not do this, as long as water, it flowed over all of your body, then khalas, ghusl is complete. Now, the mouth and nose, yes. Yes, I'm going to mention this. Now, the mouth and nose. In wudu, what did we say regarding the mouth and nose? Who can remind me? Sunnah or obligation?
It's safer to do it.
It's safer to do it. But do you remember the opinions? The majority, they said you have to do or you don't have to. Sheikh. You have to. الماجوريتي. الجمهور شو يقولون؟ ما أنت أقول ما أعرف بس يا أخي نحن دائما نسوي مضمضة واستنشاق. ها؟ طيب الجمهور يقول يس بيك الحين. طيب the majority yes سنة. طيب the majority, the جمهور, the Ahnaf, the Maliki, the Shafi'i, they said المضمضة والاستنشاق مستحب. The Hanbali, they said no, المضمضة والاستنشاق is an obligation, just like washing the face. Just like washing the face. And we mentioned this when talking about wudu. And we said, of course, when teaching or when performing wudu, definitely you don't want to put yourself in matters of this. They all agree it is better. This is the sunnah. They did not differ. Because the Messenger of Muhammad ﷺ did not perform wudu except that he did perform madmada and istinshaq. And in some instances, he did command some of the companions to do madmada and istinshaq, washing the mouth and nose. So definitely the sunnah, more reward to do madmada and istinshaq, no doubt. But a person comes to you and says, I prayed dhuhr and I am sure I did not do madmada or istinshaq. Why? How do I know? Because there are traces of milk in my mouth, and I am sure 100% I did not do madmada or istinshaq, even though usually I do madmada or istinshaq. So a person came to me, for example. I said, look, ya akhi, be careful. Make sure that you always do madmada or istinshaq. I say, okay, Shaykh, is my prayer valid? Yes, your prayer is valid. I'm not going to invalidate his prayer. That's the opinion of the majority. That, and not just because it's the opinion of the majority, there is strong evidence in this. It's their stance is strong, regarding this matter, is that it is a sunnah. Where did we get this from? So you might be asking, since you just said that the Messenger of Muhammad ﷺ did perform madmada and istinshaq in every instance that he performed wudu, and there's no one that described the wudu of the Messenger of Muhammad ﷺ except that he say ثم madmada wa istinshaq. So they always mentioned the madmada and istinshaq. Where did we get this, that it's not an obligation? Remember, I don't know if you're aware of the hadith, when the man came to the masjid, he entered the masjid, he prayed 2 units, and then he went to the masjid, hadith al-musi' li salati. So this person did not know how to pray. He repeated his prayer. Every time he'd come to the Messenger of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he'd tell him, go and repeat your prayer. You did not pray. ارجع فصلي فإنك لم تصلي. He came back to him again. Said, Salaam alaykum, alaykum salam, ارجع فصلي فإنك لم تصلي. So clearly this person, his prayer was not proper. And it was invalidated. The Messenger told you, he did not even pray properly. So here, when he said, okay, oh ya Rasulullah, علمني والله لا أجيد إلا هذه. So I did not know, I don't know except this prayer that I know. He said, إذا أتيت الصلاة فتوضأ كما أمرك الله. Perform wudu as Allah commanded you. Where did Allah command us to do wudu? Where did Allah command us to do wudu? Yes. In the Quran, in the verse. إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم. This miskin person, okay, what will he understand? كما أمرك. So now the Messenger will give him the absolute basics of wudu, the least sufficient information regarding the wudu. So the least action, least what is considered sufficient is washing the face. The verse says اغسلوا وجوهكم. Mentioned washing the face only. So the mouth and nose were not mentioned. Madmada istinshaq is not mentioned. So that's the stance. This is why the majority, and he said that madmada istinshaq is mustahab. Now, in ghusl, it's the same thing. The majority said that the majority, and the Maliki and Shafi'is clearly said that madmada wal istinshaq in ghusl is also mustahab. Is also mustahab. Hanbali madhab, same thing. It's an obligation wudu, it's an obligation in ghusl. If somebody asks me now, when I do ghusl, should I do madmada and istinshaq? Definitely. Without a doubt, you should do madmada and istinshaq. Definitely. Without a single doubt. Remove yourself from dispute, number one. Number two, it's more rewarding. You're following the sunnah of the Messenger of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How do you know that madmada and istinshaq is the sunnah of the Messenger of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How do you know that madmada and istinshaq and ghusl is the sunnah of the Messenger of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? They want to give him all the reward. And he's getting all the reward. He's answering questions. Come on, you guys don't want anything? He's getting all the reward. Yeah, Ibrahim. ثم توضأ وضوءه للصلاة. And the hadith that we just mentioned, he washed his hands and then توضأ وضوءه للصلاة. وضوءه للصلاة means that he washed his usual wudu, which includes washing the mouth and nose. طيب. So these matters of dispute, it's good to know the dispute, the limits of the dispute and why they differed, but it also tells you what to do to protect your worship. Once you know where the dispute is, so you know what, I want to do what is safe. I want to do what is safer for my worship. So, in terms of ghusl, the least was considered valid in ghusl to wash, to encompass your whole body with water, and washing the mouth and nose on the Hanbali madhab. Now, what if a person jumps into a pool? He's in a state of janaba. He jumps into the pool, and in a pool, he does not touch his body, so he just jumps into the pool, and then he leaves, he climbs out. Did this person wash his whole body? Yes.
If the pool is tahir first and and then
I knew that someone was going to say this. Yeah. Remember when we talked about water, purity of the pool, usually it's tahir, yeah, inshallah. Even if I want to ask you a question. I want to ask, if you saw with your own eyes, okay, a small boy urinating inside this pool, does that mean the pool is impure?
No.
Why are you? Yes. Yes. So the criterion here is that it was not changed by impurity. We mentioned this in the first classes. If water was changed by impurity, then definitely it's najis. If it was not changed, even though you saw with your own eyes, I think this is even the four madhabs will say that it's not impure. It's pure, since it did not change. Where did the four madhabs differ? If it's a small amount of water, and then an impurity entered the small amount of water. Here's where they differed. But for example, a pool, usually pools is a big amount of water, and also pools are like filtered. And chlorine, you don't see, there's a taste or smell of chlorine. This does not affect the purity. We said impurity. Impurity, changed by impurity. This is where we say the pool is valid. So let's say, for argument's sake, that the pool is valid.
he also has to wash his head. His head has to.
But he jumped inside, Sheikh. He dived.
If he has the niyyah, it's.
Okay, he has if his intention is there. And he dived, so his whole body covered water. What? Valid ghusl? Valid ghusl. Removing yourself from the dispute, also he washed his mouth and nose. Khalas, his ghusl is valid, given that he had the intention. And I gave a question to the brothers. I said, you can have two brothers. For argument's sake, both of them are in a state of janaba. They jumped into the pool. Okay, then after they climbed out, one of them has removed the janaba, has removed the major ritual impurity, while the other did not. How is this possible? Even though they did both, they did the same action. Yeah, one of them did not have the niyyah. So the person who had the niyyah of ghusl, khalas, it suffices him. It suffices him. Even if he did not touch his body, so he did not wipe his body, he encompassed his whole body in water, this suffices him. And just removing himself from the spit, he washed his mouth and nose. طيب. In ghusl, the hair must be washed. The hair must be washed. Whether it's long or short, hair must be washed. Now, what for women, if the hair is knotted, if it's knotted, there are knots. Is she required to undo the knots? No. She is not required to undo the knots. As long as she pours water over it, especially ghusl janaba, because this is something that is repeated. And the scholars, they said, the companions, even at the time of the companions, they said this is considered the hardship. If as soon as, because a lot of the women, they used to tie their hair in knots. So imagine after every ghusl, they had to undo their knots to perform ghusl. It's a type of hardship. So they said, so the Messenger of Muhammad did allow this, that they were not required to undo the knots of their head, but they're still required to pour water over it, so to wash the head. But they did not need to undo the knots. And whether it's janaba or hayd, the majority. The Hanbali madhab excluded hayd. They said hayd is once every month. So once every month, it's not a hardship. She needs to undo the knots. But the majority said whether it's hayd or ghusl janaba, she does not need to undo the. Do you guys know what I mean by undoing the knots? I don't know if you have this. Here it used to be common, the hair, with having knots in the hair. Of course, the sisters are experts, but you don't have. طيب. Now, this is what is considered wajib in ghusl. What is mustahab in ghusl? Real quick. Washing first the genitalia, the private parts. Then doing a complete wudu before ghusl. Pouring water over the head 3 times, we mentioned this. Washing the rest of the body, starting with the right side. I have a question. In wudu, what if a person, so a person washing, for example, when he washed his hands, after washing the face, He washed his hands. He started with the left side. So he washed his left side first and then washed his right side. What's the ruling? Is this wudu correct? Yes.
It's correct because it's sunnah.
Okay, طيب. Good. Starting with the right side, this is a sunnah. So this is what's important. Look, doing the wudu as the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ did, this is simple, this is good. But if a person makes a mistake, this is where it's important for you to understand what actions are sunnah, what actions are pillars. If you leave a sunnah, inshallah, your wudu is valid. But if you leave a pillar, for example, of the pillars, who can remind me what are some of the pillars of wudu other than washing the body parts? Other than washing the body parts. Riya is a condition of the pillars, yes. Order, what else?
Duration.
So muwala, yes, duration. So it has to be, each body part should be following the other, and the duration, there should not be long gaps in washing the body parts. Al-muwala. طيب, yes, these two things. So for example, if a person did wudu but in the wrong order, as we mentioned, it's a pillar, so his wudu is invalid. He has to do it in the proper order, as the verse mentioned. If a person, there was a question here, one of the brothers was mentioning this. He said, I wash all my body parts except my feet. I walk to the masjid and then wash my feet here. What did you remember? Someone asked this question. I said, this is invalid. Why?
It's invalid, but he can wash do the step before it and then.
La, but there's a long gap. This is a person did an incorrect order. We say go, for example, he left, for example, washing the head. So here he washes the head, given that there's not a long gap. He washes the head and he continues the rest of the body parts in that order. But there's a long gap. There's no muwala. There's a long gap here. He has to redo the whole wudu. There's a long gap. He has to do the whole wudu. And this is clearly a long gap. Walking from home to the masjid. No, this is clearly a long gap. Clearly, and there's no dispute in this. There's a long gap and he has to do his whole wudu. And there's no difference in the madhabs regarding muwala in wudu. There is difference regarding muwala in ghusl, subhanallah. But in wudu, there's no difference. All of them said that there should be no long gaps. Now, this is an important point that we have to mention here. Pay attention to this. Does ghusl raise minor and major ritual impurity? يعني, if you were required to do wudu, and you were in a state of janaba, is performing ghusl only sufficient, or do you need to do ghusl and wudu? What do you guys think? Yeah.
It's better to do both, but you can only do ghusl.
You can only do ghusl. So if you do ghusl alone, you can just do ghusl alone. Without, even if let's say in the ghusl you just jumped in the pool, you had the intention of ghusl only, you jumped in the pool, you did madmada al-istinshaq with niyyah. You just had the intention of ghusl. طيب, and then can you go and pray? I thought you just said that. La, better before is better. When you didn't understand, it's better. Huh?
He answered correct first.
Yeah, you're correct actually. If you do a ghusl, even if you did not do wudu in that ghusl by itself removes both the major and minor ritual impurity. Minor ritual impurity is hadath. What requires wudu. This is minor ritual impurity. Major ritual impurity is janaba. So if a person does ghusl alone, he removes both. He can pray directly. There's no issue in this. He can pray directly. طيب. But this is only if a person is in janaba. Be careful. If a person, why do I say this now? Now this is the tricky part. So first point you have to understand, if you do just ghusl by itself, if you are in a state in janaba only if you're in a state in janaba, if you do ghusl, khalas, you remove both major and minor. Because they said, what's the point? How is it possible to remove the major ritual impurity and the minor stays? They said it's impossible. That's why they said if you do ghusl, it removes both major and minor. You know where the issue is? The issue is what if you were not in a state of janaba? And let's say you do ghusl for Jum'ah prayer, and you did not perform wudu, you just did the normal ghusl. This is very, very problematic. Many people would say, Why is this not allowed? Yes, you did not remove the hadath. If you did not perform wudu, that ghusl does not remove hadath. This is where they dispute it. This is the problem. So, yes. Yeah, this is something else. Who says غسل يوم الجمعة واجب؟ شوش علينا. Who of the madhab said غسل يوم الجمعة واجب؟ هذا بس كتب الحديث. طيب, let's say, for argument's sake, يعني, that as the majority, يعني, that غسل يوم الجمعة is mustahab. طيب, let's say that you performed, a person wanted to do ghusl for يوم الجمعة and go directly to pray. Here, in this case, if there was no janaba, it's better to do the sunnah. The sunnah to do what? To wash your genitalia first and then perform wudu. This wudu, alhamdulillah, will suffice you. But let's say, no, he wants to do just the basic ghusl, just washing all of his body parts. We say, la, the wudu, you still didn't even, the hadath still is not raised. Why is that? Because there was no janaba to remove both. If there was a janaba, it would have removed both, no problem. But there's no janaba. And for you to do wudu, the order is important. So be careful. Yani if you had janaba, you do ghusl, alhamdulillah, you can go and pray directly. If you did not, at least when you do ghusl, perform wudu before the ghusl. Number one, you're following the sunnah to do wudu before ghusl. Number two, it will suffice you because the wudu in that ghusl will remove the hadath. Okay, and that ghusl you did for Jum'ah, it does not remove it's not going to remove the hadath by itself. It's very important. Does everyone understand this? Because this is very common. Many people fall into this mistake. Yes. Salamatullah.
Going back to the swimming pool example, when if somebody did the swimming or whatever, do they still have to make a wudu before the swimming, or they can just...
Okay, this depends. Is this person on a state of janaba or not?
Assume both states.
Okay, let's say if he was on a state of janaba. Okay, in this case, if he jumps into the pool and intends raf' al-hadath, then it will suffice him. Both the janaba and hadath will be removed. He can go and pray directly. طيب. In the other scenario, he was not in a state of janaba. طيب. And he jumped into the pool. He intended ghusl. Yalla, he intended ghusl. Still, it will not help him. He needs to do wudu. Even if okay, you said intends wudu, صح? Good. If he intends wudu, he has to intend like washing the hands first and doing the order of the limbs.
So if he is in the state of janaba,
it removes both. He can just, yes.
even though he's not following the...
Yes, even if he just jumps into the pool.
He's not following the process.
Yes.
When he's not in the state of janaba,
Yes, he needs to do wudu.
in a state,
He must do the wudu, he must do a wudu, even if he intends it. Clear?
yeah, I understand that.
It's you know where the issue is? When we said janaba, when we said ghusl removes janaba, it said janaba is the major ritual impurity. They said if it removes the major ritual impurity, then it will definitely remove that which is lesser than it.
Let's just stay in both cases. I don't intend to argue.
Yeah, no, I understand. So you're saying so if you allowed it here, why don't you allow it there? This is what you're saying, yeah?
Like if I shoot by a bullet, if I shoot by a missile, the missile does in both states.
Yeah, I understand, yes. That's why they said, يعني, this is a tricky matter. So this is where some of them differ. So they say, يعني, to protect yourself, just follow the wudu, the sunnah, doing wudu first in a mustahab ghusl, and then doing your ghusl. So this point, jazakallah khair. I wanted to mention this point for it to be clear. Now, I'm going to end with this final point, and then next week, inshallah, we're going to be entering tayammum, matters of tayammum. Now, a person in janaba, if he performs wudu, does wudu will it lessen this janaba? Is it preferred? Yes, for certain things. Before eating and drinking, if a person is in a state of janaba. Of course, what is best, if a person is in a state of janaba, it's best for him to remove the state of janaba as soon as possible. But if not, for example, he wants to go and eat, for example, he wants to go do the ghusl later. He wants to go and eat. The sunnah is to perform wudu. طيب, before eating or drinking. If a person is in a state of janaba. If he wants to sleep, the sunnah is also to perform wudu. Better than this is to perform ghusl, but before sleeping, it's better for him to perform wudu before sleeping. Okay? And of course, regarding intercourse, if a person is in a state of janaba, before intercourse, doing wudu is better. It's better for him. As the hadith, I think, mentioned, فَإِنَّهُ أَنْشَطُ لِلْعَوْدِ. It will energize him. It will energize him. So these are the matters regarding ghusl. And inshallah, we will continue next week. I will start with the revision. Yes?
You never answered what are the conditions to be considered a traveler?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so this is regarding the... Now the traveler. So many rulings are regarding a person who is considered a traveler. For example, qasr in salah, wiping on footwear. Who is considered a traveler? طيب. Let's say you're traveling, let's give an example. You're traveling, an easy one, for example, traveling by car from Dubai to Abu Dhabi. Simple. From Dubai to Abu Dhabi. Is this, first of all, is this considered a journey where a person is called a traveler? Yes. It's more than 82 or 83 kilometers. And you're going to be crossing, you're going to be leaving the limits of one city to the other. So going from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, yes, during the road, the journey from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, you're considered a traveler, number one. Now, when can you use the concessions of travel? Once you leave the limits of the city. It's simple. From Dubai to Abu Dhabi, the limits are Marina area. Once you leave the buildings of Marina area, once you start the stretch of the road, khalas, you're considered a traveler now. Now it's permissible for you to shorten your prayer, to combine prayer in masih. If you started your masih now, you have 3 days. If you started earlier, while you're in the city, no, you still have 1 day because you started it while you're a resident. But if you started the masih, wiping of a footwear, while you are a traveler, now you have 3 days. طيب, if you reach Abu Dhabi, are you still a traveler? Are you still a traveler? Or it depends?
Where you resident? Depends.
Okay, first of all, it depends. If you're not from Abu Dhabi, let's say you're not from Abu Dhabi.
Still traveling.
You're still traveling. طيب. No, it still depends. How long are you staying there? This is where all the dispute is. How long are you staying? If you're staying 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days,
4 days now.
4 days still traveling if you don't include the first day. So the first day that you come in, if you exclude this, you stayed 3 more days or 4 more days, still, حتى 4 more days, so that you don't include the day that you come in and you stay 4 more days, still, inshallah, you're still a traveler. طيب. But the matter of 4 days, this is the opinion of the majority. And there is evidence, I don't have time to mention all the details, but wallahi, this is safer. And I remember one mufti in Medina, a Maliki Sheikh. So I mentioned the opinion that, like Sheikh Islam ibn Taymiyyah and all this, as long as you're considered a traveler in a country and you have all the concessions. He said, okay, no problem. But if you follow this opinion, he said this. He said, I'll end the discussion with this. He said this word. He said, if you follow this opinion, in the view of the 4 Imams, your prayer is invalid. And the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah, your prayer is valid. But if you follow the opinion of the 4 Imams, your prayer is valid in all opinions. He said, why do you want to risk it? And he ended the discussion with this. He said, why do you want to risk it? That's why I say, 4 days, not including the day that you come in, that you travel in, inshallah, you're considered a traveler. More than that, if you intend to stay more than that, it's better to pray full and not consider yourself as a traveler. Yes.
The traveler is it preferred to combine and short the prayer?
It's preferred. No, it's preferred. It's preferred. It's preferred. No, it's not a must. It's preferred. Yes.
2 questions. One, you specified you have to leave the limits of the city and has to be over 83 kilometers.
Yes. The concessions start after leaving. So you act as a traveler after leaving the limits of the city.
And then 83 kilometers from the limits of the city?
No, 83. Yeah, they said 83 kilometers. more than 83 kilometers from the city itself, yani. From the city itself. From the city, or some of them say from the limits. 83 kilometers.
Okay, and then also second question, what does day mean here? Is it 24 hours since you came?
When I say wiping, or?
No, you said...
Days. 24 hours, yeah.
So say I travel, so say I arrived at 12:30 p.m. So then 24 hours. I don't count the day from 12:30.
No, it's when you're saying how many days I stay, right? When you're saying staying, okay. Actually it's not 24. I'm confused here, but I remember they take into consideration when you entered the city. So if you entered the city during the day, they mentioned this. If you entered the city during the day, so before sunset, then they say this day is not counted. You have 4 extra days. If you enter the city after sunset, so this is considered your first day, the start of your day. So they do take into consideration sunset and but there's another matter that I want to mention for you living in Dubai, and many people make this mistake. In Dubai, if you're going to the airport, we mentioned leaving the city limits, yeah? Is the airport inside the city limits or is it outside the city limits?
It's the time that we're going to.
Huh?
What's the effort you're going to? If you're going
No, Dubai. Inside. Huh? Okay, good. This point actually, the Fatwa Majlis, they took into consideration this. But before the Fatwa, they said the airport itself, it's inside the limits. But what he mentioned is a valid point. The Emirates Majlis for Fatwa in Abu Dhabi, they had this discussion. And they said for a traveler, by airport, even though in Dubai is considered, the airport itself is considered inside the city limits, they said once your passport is stamped, there is no way for you to go back. Even if you do the impossible. They said there's no way for you to go back. So they said, why, if a person leaves the city limits, he can still come back. But if he leaves, after his passport is stamped, no matter what he does, he cannot go back. And they have muftis from different madhabs. So they said that if your passport is stamped, it will be considered that you have left the limits. And this fatwa, I heard it recently, and it's a fatwa of the Majlis. And it sounds, it sounds good, it's very valid. But in these matters where you're confused between two things, and am I in the limits or not? As I mentioned, these things you take into consideration that why do I risk it? Let me assume that I'm in the limits, I'm not going too hard. And for a traveler, what are the rulings? You're a traveler, you can combine and shorten your prayer. You're a traveler, you can break your fast in Ramadan. You do not break your fast until you're considered a traveler. Before that, no. So an agreement, you leave the house in the day of Ramadan, going to the airport, now you're not allowed to break your fast. In all of them, agreement. You're not allowed, you're still not a traveler. You enter the airport, here, some might say, you got your passport, for example, stamped, here's the fatwa. But after you enter the plane, you travel, khalas. Here nobody will say you're inside the limits, khalas, you left. You can break your fast, you can join combined prayer, even though it's recommended not to, since you're going to be going into the airport, unless you're going to be praying Fajr. And inshallah, once we finish purification, once we enter the book of prayer, all of these details, inshallah, will be explained again. Yes?
The final question, what counts as before sunset or after sunset? Because if you think about certain ways, either...
Maghrib prayer. Maghrib adhan. This is sunset. When we say sunset, because with sunset, we enter a new day.
Yeah, what counts as arriving before sunset? What counts as...
Yeah, you enter the city. You enter the city limits before sunset. They said, this is what they mentioned. But now it's... I remember them saying this, but why did they say this? Now it's not clear for me. But they said, the day that you enter in is not counted. So where is the issue? If you enter before sunset by 1 hour, so that day is not counted, but it's useless for you because the day finished. 1 hour later, the day finished. So now you started the 4 days. This is what. The details of this we'll be discussing, inshallah, in Book of Prayer. All the details, inshallah. Yes, brother. Other than the journey itself, so let's say the journey is 12 hours. This is not included. Let's say you entered the country now. Let's say you entered during the day. This day is not included. 4 days other than this. Yeah, if you're staying more than 4 days, yeah, pray regular. Okay? Yes. Home country. Home country. How are you, traveler? Yeah. Yeah, since this is your home country, you still have your house there. You have a house, you're a resident there. Then as soon as you enter, you're no longer traveling. The journey, you can shorten your prayer and combine, but once you reach inside, you're no longer a traveler.
For example, there's a person who travels another country, like Turkey, for 3 cities over there for 1 week.
Okay, so good. So you went to another city for 1 week. 1 week you're staying 1 week, yeah? Let's say you stayed 3 days and then you go to another city. These 3 days you're a traveler, and then you go to another city, you stay another 3 or 4 days, you're a traveler there. So each journey is separate. Okay? طيب. With this we will end. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. جزاكم الله خير.